All right, hello world. This is CS50 on Twitch. My name is Colton Ogden, and I'm today joined by
CS50's David Malan.
Nice. And oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. What are we talking about today?
So Colton's invited me here today to talk about CS50 Sandbox, which is one of CS50's web-based applications, and it complements what's known as CS50 IDE, with which many folks are probably familiar, which is a more featureful web-based IDE or integrated development environment.
Nice. And I mean, traditionally in the past, from my memory, we had to do things like install, VMware, or even before that, we had the CS50 appliance.
Yeah, back in the day, so really back in the day, when I first started teaching CS50 and even took CS50 many years ago, we would all have usernames and passwords on one of Harvard's own central servers, and that server ran Unix or Linux or some similar operating system.
This was even before the thing that I was referring to. This is way back.
This is way back. This is old school stuff. It's 10, 20 years ago. And what everyone would do in the class is connect via Telnet, which is really old school, program or protocol, or more recently via SSH, secure shell, via encryption, to Harvard server, where everyone had a home directory, like a folder where they could put files, and they had access to compilers like GCC or Clang and GDB and other such tools. But fast forward to more recent years, we actually moved off of that environment to a virtual machine, as you say, using VMware or Parallels or other software, where students started running on their own Macs or PCs, a virtual machine, so their own copy of Linux, and we called it the CS50 appliance. That was a bit heavyweight, and frankly, it was a bit annoying to support for students because if they changed their operating system or upgraded something, the thing would often break. And so we eventually transitioned to a cloud-based integrated development environment, thanks to our friends at Cloud9, now at Amazon. But that is a complete IDE with a debugger built in and persistence and any number of other features. And so what CS50 Sandbox, which we'll look at today, do, as well as a counterpart tool, it's really about quick and dirty programming environments. When you just want to demo something, you want to just try out an idea, you don't want to have to organize your files and save things and use your day-to-day environment, you can just spawn one up and throw it away after.
And the beautiful thing too, and I think one of the original sort of motivations for the appliance is that everybody's in a consistent environment that's set up the same way.
Indeed. So that's been very important because it's just no fun, especially for new programmers, to figure out why is my Mac not working, why is my PC not working like the instructors is, and so we instead try to just normalize everyone's environments by using, these days, a browser alone.
Awesome. So today we're actually also for the very first time looking at all three platforms we stream to. We stream to Twitch normally, and we've been looking at Twitch chat exclusively up until now. But we're also looking at YouTube and Facebook chat today. So if you want to toss questions in both of those chats, we'll try and pluck them off, definitely draw our attention to them if we miss them. But I say we cut straight to your computer here and begin to talk about what the Sandbox is.
Start by way of a demo?
Let's do that.
So everyone's welcome to play along at home. In fact, we can type into the chat here, sandbox.cs50.io. Sandbox is also a term of art. You might have grown up with one outside, like literally a box of sand that you can play in and build things in. A sandbox in computer science is typically some kind of environment where you can only do certain things, and you are sandboxed from, that is protected from, other users. And that's indeed the case with CS50 Sandbox. The programming environment that you can spawn and create for yourself is just for you. And you have administrative or root privileges. You can install software, remove software, but it's just your own until we then throw it away eventually. No one else theoretically can access that unless you proactively allow them to do so. So it's a nice secure environment in theory for programming.
Nice, and this is great because it's just right in the web browser. On any computer, a Chromebook even, something with minimal resources could go in here and using someone else's server online, tap into some pre-configured programming environment.
Yeah, exactly, and we have support now for bunches of languages, and the very first thing to do is to go to that URL, sandbox.cs50.io. You may ultimately be prompted to log in via GitHub, and most everyone on this stream probably has a github.com account. If you don't, sign up for one for free at github.com. We can paste that in as well.
Sure.
And that account just allows you to use this same tool. Even though it itself doesn't use GitHub, we do use their authentication mechanism simply to ensure that we know whose sandbox belongs to who. So here we have the main menu, and there's really very few questions asked of you initially. Let me go ahead and just click on these environments, and you can actually see the languages and the tools that are available on the system. So most any language you can think of these days can you program in CS50 Sandbox. We use C and Python, HTML, a bit of JavaScript and so forth, SQLite, but there's other languages as well. And if there's something you'd like to use and you don't see on this list, just email us at sysadmins@cs50, sysadmins@cs50 cs50.harvard.edu, and we're happy to figure out if we can install it for you as well.
And you were even telling me, I mean, we update this pretty consistently. We just recently added a couple new environments to this, right?
Indeed. Hot off the press as of this morning is now support for Erlang, Go, Haskell, and Prolog by request of one of our friends out in Amsterdam whose university uses those languages in their courses as well.
I'm going to keep bugging you, but no closure.
No, but because Colton only asked me for closure support about an hour ago. So when you get here on the main menu, the default tab is called Create Sandbox, because presumably that's the default behavior that you'd want. And we pre-check what we presume are the most common options. In this web programming environment, you probably want a terminal window, and in fact, you have to have a terminal window to do anything useful with it. And we presume that you also want a text editor with tabs so that you can actually create or edit files.
What's this thing called an X window?
Yeah, so on Linux or Unix-based systems, you can have graphical user interfaces or GUIs, even though you might be more familiar nowadays with a command line interface to those systems. X Windows is the software that you can run on such an operating system in order to add graphical support. It's essentially a piece of server software that just sits there waiting and listening for clients to connect to it so as to display their interfaces. We can mimic this in the browser. It's a little slow, and it's good really for very slowly interactive programs, buttons and menus, but not for animation, not really for games, because you have an entire internet between you and the servers that are running this environment.
Sure, you're making network requests, basically sending your code over, and then they have to send you back sort of the visual changes that get updated on their
that's
server.
a lot of bits.
Yeah. It looks like Geert V. Kathoven's asking, so is this free and better than Cloud9?
It is free and different from Cloud9, I would say. It is a subset of the features that Cloud9 and in turn CS50 IDE provides. That is by design. Among our goals was to create an alternative to CS50 IDE that students wouldn't use day to day for their problem sets, but instead, if they want to just try out an idea, they want to do a demonstration, they want to share their code in an interactive way with someone else, and in the case here on campus at Harvard and Yale and elsewhere, we wanted to make it easier for our teaching fellows or teaching assistants who help me and Colton with the course to be able to just quickly do demonstrations in class and do it in a uniform environment. If you've used CS50 IDE or any IDE, you're probably used to creating projects and folders, and you probably want to keep them organized in the file browser and such. And that's fine, but that's a lot for new programmers. We really want to get the tool out of the way and enable students to focus on the code and the compiler and eventually the debugger. But here we have really the first of those two.
And I mean, we've even used this on stream a couple times where we want to just really fast get someone's code and just tweak it a little bit or test something out.
Just yesterday in the code reviews, the fastest way for me to pull up a programming environment was just to use CS50 Sandbox.
And a couple people, by the way, are saying that they're impressed with how you're dressing up. So Bavik Knight says that you dress up like a real professional for streams nowadays.
Thank you. It's really just a coincidence because lately in the mornings I've been teaching a course at Harvard's Business School, which is for the MBA students there, for which I dress up a little more fancy.
No, it took the fun out of it a little bit.
No, I mean, I dressed up just for Colton's streams there.
All right, well, why don't we fire one up? I'm curious to see what they look like.
So if you'd like to play along at home and you're at sandbox.cs50.io, literally the first thing you can do is hit enter or click create to get the default settings. And what you'll see as after a few seconds is a pretty simple environment. And indeed, that's by design. We wanted to get rid of as much visual clutter as possible to focus only on the problem at hand, which is presumably commands and code.
Right.
And indeed, that's all you see. At the bottom half of the screen here, you see a familiar terminal window. The GUI, or user interface, looks a little different in Sandbox than it does in Cloud9 because these are different tools, but same idea. The file browser and code editor are a little different, but hopefully pretty straightforward. I have no files initially, so if I click on the folder icon, there's nothing there. But if I click the plus icon, I get a little dialog window where I can create or upload a file. So if you've already got some code, you can drag and drop it, or click the upload button, or you can just type out a file like hello.c if I want to write a program in C. But it doesn't have to be for C. It could be hello.py or hello.go or any number of other languages as well.
UBFWTYG3, I'm not sure how to actually pronounce that, is saying that it's a little bit laggy. If you're watching on Twitch, we are streaming to youtube.com/CS50 and also on Facebook, where you can get a lower bit rate there and a more watchable stream. And Bavik Knight actually asks an interesting question. How is this different from CS50 Labs?
Well, we're going to get there today. CS50 Labs is a superset of CS50 Sandbox. It essentially is an environment for presenting lessons, tutorials on programming, embedding CS50 Sandbox as part of it, but adding to it instructions on the left-hand side, which you might have seen in CS50X 2019. We introduced this for problem set 1 and 2 in the first couple of weeks of the class.
And then Von Dingle, I'm not sure if you just answered that, but when did Sandbox become available in CS50?
September of 2018.
Nice.
So just a few months ago.
So I will say I do like very much how this is laid out. The color scheme, somebody mentioned that it's dark theme and that they're a fan of it. But having just the editor and the terminal, I think we were just talking about this today. It's a kind of an ideal minimalist development environment.
Yeah, it is. And much of the UI that you're seeing on the bottom portion of the screen is thanks to our friends at Codevolve, now called next.tech. We met them just about a year ago and began this collaboration to make this tool available to CS50 students. So the interactive code window, the file browser, and the terminal window is provided by next.tech, which is running on top of Google's cloud, and they're providing a very similar feature that Cloud9 on Amazon provides for CS50 IDE.
Nice. The True Kinese is asking how temporary, and you might be talking about this, but how temporary is the sandbox we create, and can we share the link to a created sandbox to somebody else?
Short answer, yes, on both accounts. In fact, if you go back to CS50's main sandbox's main menu, you can click on the tab called Recent Sandboxes, where you can see the past, I think we've hard-coded it to be the past 50 sandboxes that you've created. We haven't really decided how long we're going to keep them around. The design of CS50 Sandbox, per the tagline here, is that these are meant to be temporary. So more than a day, maybe less than a month. We're going to see what the usage patterns are exactly like and sort of figure this out as we go to really decide what the best use case is. For now, we're saying temporary, which you should assume is maybe a month, give or take, but you shouldn't plan long-term. CS50 IDE is meant for long-term, persistent software development, so do keep that in mind.
I am getting a little bit of a Bootstrap vibe from that landing page that happened to be written in Bootstrap.
Oh, I'm very good with the Bootstrap. Indeed. No, Bootstrap, if you're unfamiliar, is a popular CSS library. If you want to go to getbootstrap.com
Sure.
on the streams, it's freely available, originated at Twitter some time ago, and it just is a nice set of widgets and CSS properties that you can use to make your websites look nice, hopefully, without having to figure out how you make tabs and nice looking buttons and all of that yourself. It's nicely responsive, so all of this will collapse mostly nicely when your browser gets small. But
it does look nice.
Bootstrap takes care of the UI for us.
And then also the sharing of sandboxes.
Yeah, so sharing is possible, and this is not going to be a very interesting sandbox, but let's go ahead and do this real quick. Let me go ahead and whip up the simplest of programs in C here. So include standard.io.h. int main void, and you'll notice it has syntax highlighting like CS50 IDE, and it's providing that feedback to me visually. Hello world, semicolon. So here's a very simple C program. And if you all would like to now get a copy of this sandbox, it won't be interactive. You'll get a snapshot in time. I can go ahead and click the share icon. You'll notice that I see a bit.ly URL, and if Colton wouldn't mind pasting this into the chat, if you go to bit.ly/2GQV in capitals, lowercase BPL, I think.
Let me confirm that that is correct.
Nope, try BPI.
BP capital I.
Sometimes bit.ly URLs are hard to read, even though they're easy to click.
This one's doing work. Okay, so that
All right,
one
here
was
we go.
correct.
Colton's about to paste it into the chat. If you go ahead and click the bit.ly link you're about to see, you'll have a copy of my sandbox, and you can pick up where I have left off. So the use case here is in one of our on-campus classes, or sections as we call them. If a teaching fellow or teaching assistant is in the front of the room demoing some program, and he or she wants their students to start playing with the code, or maybe find some bug in the code, or fix some bug in the code, they can just share or write on the blackboard or whiteboard that URL and let everyone get a copy of it.
Dusko11, Ying Yang 77, YMCM Benny, and Headhunter, thank you very much for the follows as well. I guess you might have touched on this, but Fatih Dilmak is asking, what's the difference between the IDE and the sandbox?
So CS50 Sandbox is a lighter weight version of CS50 IDE. It does not have a debugger. It does not have built-in chat functionality. It doesn't have collaboration in real time, but it does have the ability to share sandboxes by making copies of them.
And presumably, because it's so much more lighter weight, is it more performant and easier to spin up instances?
It's faster to start. It probably takes 5 to 10 seconds, whereas the IDE may take 5 to 60 seconds because it's a longer-term environment that your files are persisted on in perpetuity.
And sometimes they even shut your instance down a little bit, and they have to sort of refire or reinstantiate, and that can take time.
Indeed, to save time and costs on the cloud.
M4N Jews asking, is interactive IDE on the cards? Which I'm not entirely sure what that is asking.
Do rephrase that if you could. Not sure what you mean.
And the True Kines, thank you very much for the follow as well. And so now if folks try to go to this link that we just pasted in all of the chat URLs, will we see their changes in real time?
We will not. They will get their own copy of this, and indeed, if they look at the URL, they will now be at a different URL than I because
see.
they've been sent to their own sandbox.
Okay, so it kind of forks it and rehashes the URL.
It is. If you're familiar with GitHub, it's like a fork, but with no ability to merge your changes later. That is by design.
Okay. Tuxman asks an interesting question. He says, kind of related. I want to start a coding club to introduce younger kids to command lines and text editor programming. Could they use CS50 Sandbox, or do you prefer to reserve it for CS50 and CS50X?
No, everyone and everyone are welcome to use it. We have some support from our friends at Google who've kindly helped us make this available to students more generally. So Tuxman29, please feel free to use it. Just keep in mind that it's a new tool and it's evolving. And again, the environments are meant to be temporary. Use CS50 IDE if you want to guarantee that the student's work persists day after day after day after day.
And then Bavik Knight's asking the same question that I just asked. And then Senso Touch 3D was asking, how long are the copies stored? And you said that that's kind of a variable length of time, but you're saying assume a month or less.
Yeah, assume some number of days where we haven't decided yet. I mean, anything is possible. We just have to figure out first just what the sweet spot is and what people want to use it for.
Cool, awesome. Just making sure that we have caught up on the chat across all platforms here.
Oh, I see Nathan on YouTube has asked, couldn't David do hello.py? Yes, he could do that as well. Let me go ahead and do hello.py, and if I do this, print hello world. There you go. All done with hello.py.
And so there's a file system present here. So if you click on that folder, then I'm presuming that you'll get a little sidebar.
Indeed. Now we'll see two files, hello.c and hello.py. And you'll notice, or maybe you didn't notice with my fingers here, I never once went to File, Save. I didn't hit Control-S or Command-S. Everything in this environment actually auto-saves. Additionally, by design, so that students who are programming for the first time don't have to think about their code maybe being different in the browser from what it actually is in the terminal window when they're trying to run or compile it.
And then you can presumably create folders and things like that as well.
Yep, you can do that in a couple of ways. So one, we can do this with makedir, M-K-D-I-R, if you're familiar with that command. Or we can also do that by, can we do this here? Actually, let's try this. Nope, you have to do it at the command line right now.
Okay.
And this, at the moment, is by design, though we should perhaps try to make that a little easier. The goal being that we don't really expect students to be creating hierarchies of files and folders because, again, these are meant to be quick and dirty environments where there's really no notion of a file system. There's just a collection of files that you are currently using. However, underneath the hood, and you can see this if you hover over the files, that's technically in a folder called /root/sandbox/hello.c. And we can actually see this here. If we print working directory, pwd, you'll see where you actually are.
And so how much of a Linux environment are we getting through the sandbox?
This is a complete installation of Ubuntu 18.04. You can see this if we do cat etc issue, which is a file that shows us a little something about the underlying system.
Okay.
If you want to see the kernel, you can see that as well, running full-fledged Linux here. And underneath the hood, it's using containers, which is a technology similar in spirit to virtual machines, but a little lighter weight and cloud-based in this case. So all of you have access, administrative access, to your own container, and you can do things even like apt-get install Fortune or some such program. You can do pip install, you can do gem install. Those changes won't persist because, again, these are temporary programming environments, but while you're working on a project or program, you can install anything you want.
YMCM Benny was asking, can we upload from CS50 Sandbox to GitHub or download a repo? And I'm guessing we probably do have Git installed or can download Git.
Yep, there's no GUI for that, but you can absolutely run any Git command. You'd have to be comfortable, though, with the command line interface. So git clone, git pull, git fetch, and so forth.
Cool, awesome. Just make sure we're all caught up with everything, which it looks like we're doing pretty well. What's the deal with everyone using MacBooks because of Terminal?
In higher education, at least in the US, Macs are actually very popular. PCs are much more popular globally, but this has long been the case that Macs within education tend to be a bit more popular. Not everywhere, but that's definitely the case at Harvard. It's crazy, but it's probably the case that in CS50 on campus, 80% of students or more
I would
have
say
Macs
more,
these days.
based on my observations,
It could be even higher. So that's just been the trend, especially in recent years, especially as the iPhone got popular here as well.
Srinivas is asking, will there be any sessions on machine learning in the future? Probably. We have one already on binary classifiers with Nick Wong. So if you go back to our VODs, go to our Twitch playlist on YouTube, you'll see one of Nick's first stream was a machine learning introduction.
And Fatih Dilamak, I'm not sure where you got that URL. That's one of the temporary URLs to which you're redirected. That won't work. It's only temporary. Go to cs50.io for CS50 IDE.
ID.cs50. Oh, okay, I see. Interesting.
So don't bookmark that. And rarely should you bookmark an ugly-looking link like that. It's you almost always meant to be temporary.
Yeah.
All right. So if for those of you who are curious as to what else is in CS50 Sandbox, let me go ahead and do this. There's actually an open source public repo, which we can paste into the chat.
Sure.
github.com/cs50/sandbox. And this isn't all of the code for CS50 Sandbox itself, but it is the code for the underlying container to which you have access, the underlying installation of Ubuntu. And some of this is here for our own administrative purposes, but you can see in this file, cs50.h, all of the commands that we have run in advance for you on top of a default installation of Ubuntu. So essentially our friends at next.tech are simply creating these containers, running Ubuntu, and they're running this script for us that installs additional software. And so this is what happened most recently. We added Go and Prolog and Haskell in addition to C and Python and PHP and Ruby and Java and so forth. So if you're curious to go through that file called cs50.h, you can just see all of the Linux commands that we run for you in advance before you even have to access the sandbox in order to ensure that you have all of the programs and files that we would want you as a student or teacher to have available to you.
And so when someone selects, for example, Go or Haskell or Erlang or whatever environment they happen to want at that moment in time, there's some condition in here or something that changes how the script is laid out?
Nope, not even. The same script is used for all of those environments. So if you are at sandbox.cs50.io, as of a few weeks ago, you just have to click a radio button and select a specific language. That is no longer the case. They all map to the same exact image, and technically they always did, but we prompted the user for an additional choice. Now you can use any of these environments in any sandbox.
I see, so they all come. Okay, so you just use the command line, whatever you want. It's already pre-installed for you.
Everything is there. So it's a big image. It's several gigabytes, but it does have everything in it. So all you're configuring at this main menu really are some of the GUI options for the user interface.
And you said it's using Docker, so I'm guessing the actual footprint of each one of these isn't in the gigabytes. It's a small portion of whatever the user's individual file system happens to be.
Correct, yeah. No, there's not crazy redundancy there, but it's actually, we're using Docker to test things, but underneath the hood, Google is not using Docker, but they are using containerization technology.
Gotcha, some other version of that.
Indeed.
Somebody has a question. Ron Laniato is asking, is CS50.net removed? Seems like it has been changed to cs50.harvard.edu.
Yeah, Ron Laniato, you're among the few that remember that domain name. Yes, it doesn't redirect anymore. We have been standardizing for several years now on cs50.harvard.edu. That was a remnant from many years ago, even though a few of our applications are still subdomains in cs50.net.
What is the tech stack, says JL97?
So it's Ubuntu as the underlying operating system. It's LXC, which is a containerization technology underneath the hood that's running on top of Google Compute or Google's cloud service. And beyond that, the GUI that you're seeing for CS50 Sandbox, like the user interface and the buttons and the form that you're submitting here and the login mechanism, all of that is implemented in Python by us, and Flask in particular.
Bavik was asking, is this a bash script, and to your sh file earlier?
Yes, cs50.sh is just a bash script that we use for you in advance before giving you a sandbox to configure that sandbox in a uniform way.
Can this be used to set up an Ubuntu dev environment in Docker on my local machine?
Short answer, yes, but what you're looking at is overkill. I would actually refer back to our Docker stream from a couple weeks ago now, wherein we started really at the beginning. So I would start there if you want to learn about Docker, not with this stream.
Because since you can just install that on your own consumer operating system, your consumer machine.
Indeed.
Thanks to Walter Weasel, Shalene Burrell 111, Alfred So, and Agent Flame. Appreciate all the hard work that goes into making this for us, says YMC and Benny, so thank you for coming in to hold the stream. Tuxman29 just created a sandbox, installed Lua 5.3 through apt, and sure enough, it doesn't simply work. The text editor highlights Lua. Oh, it doesn't. Not only does it work, but the text editor also highlights Lua code. I'm impressed.
Thank you. We didn't do that part, but you're very welcome. Awesome. But if that's of genuine interest and you want to keep using Lua, actually, what version of Lua do we have installed? Any? No, we never installed it. So
someone actually brought up a prior point in one of the messages saying that we didn't have a Lua configuration.
Okay, well, we can do that. So do send us a note, sysadmins at cs50.harvard.edu.
I think we already plugged that, yeah.
And we're happy to try to split that into the image.
Some of Dr. Malan's lectures, says Guy EY, refer to the man page. Where can I find that?
Man, and then the keyword. So man stands for manual in the Linux and Unix environments, and Mac OS as well. And if you know a command or a function that you want to learn more information about, you can type man and the name of that program, and you'll see an old school sort of black and white user manual for that program.
CS50 has a, doesn't CS50 have a wrapper for the man pages, or was that an in-development project?
We do. We have something called reference.cs50.net, which is only for standard C libraries, but this presents the same information in a slightly more graphical way, but it's alternative to the man page.
And this is parsing the man page database?
It did, yeah. We dumped the whole man page database, which comes freely with Linux, and parsed it and presented it as HTML instead.
Nice, that's really cool. Just make sure we're all caught up on chat because we've got a lot of questions. Bavik was saying Docker's kind of memory heavy for his PC. He's got only a 4 GB PC,
yeah,
which is understandable.
That's small these days for stuff like this, virtualization, containerization.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're pretty caught up on the questions.
All right. So why don't we take a look at what we're using underneath the hood to build this?
Sure.
So here on the main menu, recall, is where we started, and you can choose your various GUI features, but there's a few other features. If I actually click Configure here, you'll see some hidden or more advanced options, and this is really not necessary to use. But if you as a teacher, or even you as a student, want to run some number of commands before the sandbox is created, so for instance, it was Tuxman, you mentioned installing Lua. If you wanted to distribute a sandbox for your students with Lua already installed, and you didn't want to have to write instructions on the board or in an email as to how to install Lua, you could actually do it here, apt-get install, and I don't quite know the command you use, but maybe it's Lua 5.3, I'm just guessing. If that's indeed the command, you can type that into this form here, and then, if you preview the URL, you'll actually see a special URL here that's read-only that you can copy and paste to your students in an email or any mechanism like that. And you'll see that embedded in the HTTP parameters is the command you want every sandbox to run automatically, so you can just automate this process as well.
That's cool. I actually didn't realize this was a feature of the sandbox prior to the stream.
Oh, well, thank you. This part I did, though.
I like that. That's really cool.
And you can see some other information. The means by which we're getting a text editor is because we have a window equals editor parameter, and window equals terminal means we're getting a terminal window as well. And you can go one step further. Suppose that you want to create a sandbox that it doesn't use Lua, for instance, but maybe you just want to teach students about interactive Python, and therefore you don't want them to even see a Linux shell, a bash shell, so to speak. You can literally just type Python here as the command to run in the sandbox's terminal window. You'll see here that the default command now is going to be Python.
So this will happen as soon as it starts up.
Yeah, so let's try that. Let's click Create Now, or just visit that URL by copy-paste, and you'll see the same environment, but watch the terminal window this time. Instead of seeing a $sign with our bash prompt, which is the default shell that Linux typically uses, we will instead now see, once our internet here cooperates, thinking.
Yeah, and you said it's 5 to 10 seconds usually, sometimes a little longer to instantiate a sandbox.
Indeed, sometimes, though. Now
maybe for the more custom ones, do you think maybe it's doing a little bit more work since it doesn't have as much pre-cached?
No, this is not expected.
Oh, okay.
This should not be happening. Let's go ahead and reload. When in doubt, reload. Worst case, reboot, although there we go.
Oh, okay.
So something was up there. And you can see it's immediately running Python. It's not actually running bash or a Linux shell.
That's really cool. That saves so much headache, I can see potentially, especially like you said, in the context of teaching high schoolers or even younger students trying to learn, or folks that are just simply not used to this environment and want to get right to coding in Python.
Yeah, and let's get rid of the text editor, because if you're using the interactive terminal, you probably aren't working on a file, so let's turn off the text editor. Let's go ahead and configure again and run Python instead of the default bash. Click Create to just get a new sandbox, throwing away deliberately the one I previously had. And now you'll see I only have a terminal window instead of the text editor on top and the terminal window. So now the student can focus on that and only that.
This almost feels like scaffolding towards something else entirely.
How do you mean?
A little bit. This level of customizability almost lends itself very nicely towards the idea of the labs, which we were talking about.
Oh, what a nice teaser for what's about to come in just a little bit.
Let me just make sure that we're all caught up. I know Tuxman was saying, stop, I can only love the sandbox that much. So he's a fan of the features as well. I'm just monitoring all the other platforms we're on, which I think we're all caught up on comments.
We've got like 3 computers in the room monitoring all the different channels today, trying to get all the questions answered.
Yeah, no, this is great. Having them all on Twitch primarily makes it a little bit easier, but some folks are definitely chiming in on YouTube, which is cool. But I think we're all caught up.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, let's go ahead. Let me just open my chat windows there. Let's go ahead and get rid of that sandbox, and that's what I mean by temporary. Once you're done with it, just close the window, and it will eventually disappear on you. Let's go ahead and look at some of the underlying technologies, not for labs, that was an accidental teaser, but for what we're using underneath the hood here. So you'll notice that we're using Bitly somehow to share the URLs, and that's just to make them shorter. Technically, you could go to this crazy long URL that's in my browser's bar here. This is what's known as a UUID, or sometimes a GUID, which is a globally unique identifier. It's all based on probability and statistics. This is 128 bits, but presented as hexadecimal, because it'd look crazy if it were just zeros and ones.
Yeah.
And so it comes in this standard format with a few hyphens, and we just use these UUIDs so that it is incredibly unlikely that anyone on the internet is going to guess your UUID and therefore be able to see your files. It's possible, but the odds of it happening are astronomically low, and so this is a very common paradigm when you want to give unique URLs for something, but with very low probability, let other people access it. It's like in Google Docs or Google Spreadsheets. If you share a URL with the world and you give people view-only access, the only way they'll find that is by knowing the URL, or on YouTube. If you've ever uploaded an unlisted video, only by knowing the V parameter can anyone else access that video.
It's effectively the same way that we, well, not the same exact way we do it, but similar in spirit to how we hash passwords and things like that.
Similar,
to prevent people from guessing them.
Yes, and in this case, we're really just leveraging probability. Now, of course, I have zoomed in on and highlighted my secret value. So anyone there watching now could go to sandbox.cs50.io/035DFE84- and so forth, but that's crazy. Like, no teacher is going to want to write that on the blackboard in class, and so we use Bitly in order to shorten that same URL. So they're the same, but Bitly is just a lot easier to write and not always to read, as we found ourselves, but to at least write down when you want to share it with someone else. So one, we're actually using Bitly's API because we are not certainly manually going and copying and pasting these long URLs into Bitly, bit.ly's website. We're using their API to generate that. And if you recall when I logged in, if you recall when you logged in, you were probably prompted to use GitHub, and you had to authorize the app even. We're using GitHub's API for actually authenticating users. So why don't we take a quick look at those?
Yeah, let's do that. And then also thanks to Amchora ID80 and Frosty Zam for the follows. And I think maybe a couple people had questions. Bavik was asking, are Z shell or fish shell available in the CS50 Sandbox as well?
Let's take a look. I don't know about fish. I've never actually used that. Nope, not at the moment, but send us a feature request and we can try to add that. Just email sysadmins@cs50.harvard.edu. I don't know about fish, so I'm going to guess the command is fish. Not there, but we don't think it would be anyway.
And then the Soil Sheikh was asking, do we have GPU access?
Not necessarily. I don't actually know what containers are what types of containers are being used underneath the hood. Most likely not. GPU usage in the cloud would typically be more expensive, and this is meant to be a very lightweight, inexpensive mechanism, so I think that's very unlikely the case right now with the underlying cloud service.
I think we might have some aspiring Bitcoin miners in our chat.
It's not going to work, and Bitcoin mining will get detected anyway and shut down by Google.
Says Ron Laniato, would people be able to guess the Bitly URL to gain access to the sandbox?
Yes, so that is the price you pay by using any URL shortener. If you're using Bitly or tinyURL or the like, they use a smaller address space. It's not as big as 128 bits usually, which means yes, people can guess it with higher probability.
Nice. And Virtuoso7 was saying, I've been enjoying the CS50 game dev lessons. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for tuning in for those.
Nice. I hear good things. Okay, so let's take a look at GitHub API and Bitly's API, just to give you a sense of what's going on underneath the hood, because that's what's nice about Sandbox. I mean, as much as it is CS50 Sandbox, most of the environment is thanks to our friends at next.tech and Google. And most of the features we're using for authentication come from GitHub. Most of the sharing features come from Bitly. And so this is what's actually, I think, a lot fun about programming these days. Once you understand the fundamentals, you can build really cool applications by just kind of stitching together, metaphorically, different APIs and different services and building your own idea, but standing on the shoulders of really smart other people.
And I mean, this is the sort of motivation behind CS50's own mashup pset, right?
Yeah, indeed. So the CS50 mashup for that piece set was all about taking Google Maps and Google News and building something of your own on top of them.
Kind of an illustration of don't reinvent the wheel, leverage with the work that other people have already done.
I mean, this would have taken us a year or more probably to build every single component, and that's just probably not a good use of time.
Yeah.
When there's so many other pieces you can use off the shelf thanks to others.
Patrick Machado is saying that terminal usability is awesome, and then Bavik Knight asked, CS50 has CS50.ly as well, right? Is it just a wrapper of Bitly?
Used to be. CS50.ly we use for shortening some URLs. It used to be a wrapper for Bitly. We actually found it too time-consuming to use Bitly's web-based UI for shortening URLs, and so now we just re-implemented Bitly in our own web application using Flask, so that we just actually edit a GitHub repo when we want to add a short URL. Only a few of us do this, and we tend to do it longer term, so it's not arduous at all.
Cool.
All right, so let's go ahead and just Google something. GitHub authentication, not failed, although that's apparently an FAQ, API. And you'll see here we go, basics of authentication. Let's start there. There's a few steps involved whenever you're using GitHub's own authentication. That is to say, you don't want to have users come up with their own usernames and passwords on your website. You don't even necessarily want a database for those things, but you do want users to authenticate, but ideally against someone else. The catch is if GitHub or someone else is going to authenticate your users, you need to be able to talk to GitHub securely so that GitHub can say, this is Colton who's just logged in, and you want to know not his password, but his identity, his username, his user ID number, or something like that. So there's a few ways to do this with GitHub, and there's a few steps involved. You have to register your application after signing up for a free account, following instructions like these. But I'm going to go ahead and try to scroll down to something familiar here. After authorization, looking for a keyword here. I want the real docs. This isn't quite the page I want. Let me go to...
They almost look like they're using Bootstrap as well.
They have their own CSS library, actually.
Gotcha.
Let's go ahead and Google GitHub OAuth. There we go. So it turns out that OAuth, or version 2 of OAuth, is a very popular protocol for authenticating users against other websites, but getting back securely a response like Colton's username and his user ID. So frankly, we just kind of followed the instructions here, and we registered an app. We got what's called a client ID and a client secret and a few other details. And then using some code in Python and using the documentation from GitHub, did we write some code such that if you go to sandbox.cs50.io/login, you're actually redirected to github.com. You're prompted to log in there, and once to authorize the application, they then redirect you via HTTP back to us. We then check essentially a security token that they have sent to us over HTTPS, and if all looks well, we decide, yes, you are in fact Colton. And in this way, we don't need a database of users, we don't need usernames, passwords, or anything. We can just rely on our friends over there at GitHub to do all of that.
Again, recycling, or not recycling, but reusing other people's tools and technologies.
And I think the other motivation for that is not just to save time, but none of us wants to sign up for yet another darn username and password on another website. If I've already got a GitHub account, maybe just let me use that. If I've got a Google account, a Facebook account, let me use that. And so that's why you see a lot of websites offering third-party logins.
And it's investing a lot of trust in the large companies who surely have thought through a lot of these corner cases and have a lot of investment in the security of their websites.
Well, especially when it comes to adversaries out there, sort of people with way too much free time that are trying to misuse your services. GitHub, unfortunately, probably gets a lot of people trying to create fake accounts all the time, or denial of service attacks and such. And that could become something we're vulnerable to if the wrong person takes an interest. And we're in the business of educating. We're in the business of trying to create course content and connecting with students. It's arguably not the best use of our time to also have to think about all of those problems as well. So to the extent that we can lean on our friends at GitHub or any third-party service to do that hard thinking is a good thing, so that we can each focus on what we're hopefully all good at.
And M4 was asking, is this a privacy trade-off?
Absolutely. GitHub knows that you are logging into our CS50 application. We do disclaim in CS50's problem sets, and for instance, that if you're uncomfortable with that, that's fine. Create a dedicated account, a different account that doesn't use your own name, like mine is Malan. I probably shouldn't use that if I want to stay private, but you can create another account so that they know that a different user is accessing CS50 Sandbox, but not necessarily that it is you.
Thanks to the Cardinalbish, KMFDM12, and Rockcha for the follow.
Nice.
Bavik was asking, is this buggy? Facebook third-party app breaks Facebook?
I don't know what that means, but is this buggy? No, this is not buggy. Whatever we're doing.
I'm not sure. And then K Stark asks, can I run a lightweight web server and access it across the internet?
You can, not for very long, because these are temporary programming environments, so the intent is not to run a web server or a web application other than for development or student purposes. But absolutely, yes, you can go ahead and access, via CS50 Sandbox's main menu, an embedded browser, and you can create a sandbox containing this. And if we give it a moment to actually create the new sandbox, what you'll see now is not only the code editor as well as the terminal window, you're also going to see another tab here called Web Browser. That's an embedded browser using an iframe that allows you to access what's on the local computer. So let's do this really quickly. Let me go ahead and create hello.html, and let me go ahead and do doc type HTML, open bracket HTML, close bracket HTML, head, close head, title, hello, comma, world, close title, and then let me go ahead and do a quick body, close body, and then hello, comma, world.
HTML is a little ceremonious.
Yes, so a little tedious, but there's a very simple page called hello.html. If I click my folder, there indeed it is in my sandbox. And if I go ahead now and run HTTP server, which is a free program, happens to be written in JavaScript, that runs an HTTP server, a web server, you'll see that my server is available on localhost port 8080. Well, if I actually go to this embedded browser and actually scroll up here and click reload, we'll see the two files that are actually in my account. And if I click hello.html, voila, you'll see it embedded.
Nice.
And we can technically pop this out and access it in my actual browser. So if you too really want to type this out and visit this URL, you can see it temporarily, but only until the sandbox is turned off, which happens automatically after a while.
MRC021 was asking, can you walk through the offline sandbox? Is there an offline sandbox?
There is not an offline sandbox. There is an offline IDE. And if we go ahead and paste this in this URL, cs50.readthedocs.io.ide.
.ide or slash IDE?
Slash IDE. You will see exactly that documentation for CS50 IDE offline, which is frankly a bigger topic unto itself.
Amazing. Way of authentication.
Oh, the way of authentication asks Spavik Knight. Sometimes third-party apps takes us to some fishy websites, or it used to. That's possible. Frankly, that's not Facebook's fault. That's because the user has followed some link that leads him or her to a fishy website. Unrelated to what we're doing here, you'll be prompted by GitHub to say, are you sure you want to authorize CS50 Sandbox to know who you are? But that is a risk to users and a threat that you need to be mindful of, and only click links and only log into services that you are inclined to trust.
Can you use your incredible street credit at Harvard Extension to accept more of the CS game courses for the programming and software engineering certificates?
I'm not sure we have that much pull, Guy, but we will mention it to a colleague of ours.
VicJ79, what are you guys making?
Well, we've been making three things. Hello World in HTML, Hello World in Python, and Hello World in C.
Yeah, today's not necessarily an illustration of programming applications, but more the tool, the CS50 Sandbox. So if you're just tuning in now, definitely scroll back or watch the VOD later. But so far, we've seen a lot of really awesome functionality. I'm a big fan of the ability to customize in advance the sandbox before you even spin it up. I'm a big fan of that.
Indeed. Let me go ahead and just check the chat here. And here we have, let's say our final step when it comes to APIs. Let's take a look at Bitly's API. So Bitly's API is what we're using in order to shorten our URLs here. So let me go ahead in a separate window, go over here and just Google Bitly API. Since I don't remember the URL offhand, voila, we're there. Bitly's API, cute little icon
That's
there.
a new thing. I have not seen that.
Bitly or whatever that is.
It looks like a blowfish.
Let's go ahead and click documentation because this is where I started. And let's see here. Authentication, Bitlinks is where I began. So I had never used Bitly's API before this project, and so I did literally what you just saw me do. I Googled Bitly API, I clicked get started, I read some documentation, and eventually I made my way to what are called Bitlinks. That's actually the technical term they give to their short links. And you'll see here, Bitlinks is how we refer to shortened links. You can see these with the Bitly domain or your custom branded short domain. That's how we used cs50.ly originally.
An ingenious idea, too, because I imagine all they must be doing is just triggering a redirect.
Oh, yeah, this is a super simple technology.
But they must get tons of traffic and tons
of...
Oh,
yes. Yeah, no, they have wonderful analytics, and that's what people would pay them for typically, because if you share a short link on Twitter and social media, you can use Bitly to actually monitor who and how many people and from where are people coming who are clicking that link.
Martin was saying, still missing the OCaml example. Are you going to do an OCaml example? Actually, I don't know any OCaml
I'm afraid we're out of time for OCaml today. That is not my forte.
Can we have multiple contributors on a single sandbox? And I think you asked this earlier, but it's not possible.
No.
Is that right?
Only one person can contribute to a given sandbox. You can share it, but you're sharing a copy, and that is by design. The IDE provides collaboration.
Menche Danim says, will you give advanced C or C++ courses? I'm not
No
sure.
plans for such right now. There must be some such courses on edX or Coursera or the like, but we don't have plans for such.
Likely we'll touch on some of that stuff at some point on stream in the future, depending on who has interest in it, but yeah.
Big J, who are you guys? Who are you?
My name is Colton Ogden. I'm a technologist at Harvard and an instructor of a game development course.
My name is David Malan. I teach a course called CS50 here at Harvard, as well as a few others. And this stream of CS50 is all about introducing students and folks around the world to just various technologies, languages, techniques, and opportunities to learn stuff better.
Nice.
All right. So here's what I really did. If I wanted ultimately to create a Bitlink, so I clicked on Create Bitlink, and you'll see here, and the documentation for different companies is going to look different. But you have to provide some kind of request. You have to specify optionally what domain to use, if not bit.ly, a title for the link if you care to see it in the analytics, a group value if you want to somehow cluster related values, tags for your analytics and deep links and such. But the long URL is frankly the only one that really matters. That is whatever the long URL is, like sandbox.cs50.io/uuid, whatever that is, and you want to convert it to a Bitlink. So essentially, I wrote some code in Python using Flask that makes using the Python requests library an HTTP post request to Bitly's domain, and then I get back a response from them which contains the URL that I was hoping they would shorten for me, and therefore we display to the student, to the user, that short URL, and we get back a value called link, which is indeed the shortened link.
I like how they illustrated the data structure they expect, or like the model for the object they expect, and to also return.
Indeed, and it's recursive too. There's some other interesting stuff in there as well.
That's pretty cool.
So in short, like never be scared, I think, to just go off and just learn something new. We thought it would be very tedious for teachers to have to write crazy long URLs on the board, so we decided to use a URL shortener, and we could have implemented that ourselves, and indeed we did for our own URL shortener, but for a sandbox, we wanted to just lean on someone else who already does this well, so we chose Bitly, but you could use other services for the same goal as well.
CS50, Introduction to the Art of Computer Science for majors and non-majors alike, and lots of phone book ripping, don't ask.
Indeed, indeed. We don't talk about that here. So why don't we take a look at CS50 Lab, which is a separate tool that's built on top of essentially CS50 Sandbox?
Yeah, let's take a look at it.
All right, so if you're taking CS50X 2019, the latest version of CS50, freely available on edX at cs50.edx.org.
Not to be confused with the 2018 in there. I'm guessing they're referring to, they use the 2018 labs.
Correct.
But the course itself is the 2019 version on edX.
Indeed. We simply version things based on when the material was created, not when you were necessarily accessing it. You'll see here perhaps a familiar face. This is Mila Chan, a PhD student here at Harvard who's been with CS50 for some time.
She was on stream actually one time.
Oh, nice. Yeah, very true. When she came by.
For the game one.
Indeed. That's right. We played that game for a while.
We haven't done that in a little while.
No holidays recently. So you'll see here an environment that looks very similar to CS50 Sandbox, even though we're calling it, up here on the right, CS50 Lab. You'll notice that I'm indeed logged in with one of my test accounts here, Student50, and you'll see almost the same idea. We have a code editor here with a file called hello.c. We have a built-in terminal window, and the motivation of CS50 Lab is to give you a sandbox, optionally with some code pre-built, written by your teacher, and then on the left-hand side, like here, to provide some instructions. So we could, for instance, start playing Zamila's video, wherein she welcomes us to the problem and introduces us to what we're about to see. But once I'm done watching that, or any embedded video, I can go ahead and click Next and move on to the next part of the program. And you'll see that much like CS50's problem sets, which way back in the day were Word documents and then PDFs, after that they were just HTML files. Now they're still HTML files, but the coding environment is right there. You don't have to open multiple tabs on your browser or keep hitting Alt-Tab or Command-Tab to change among them.
And there's some integration between the code and the actual lab in the web browsers, they're not?
They're not, there can be, yes. With some of the more advanced labs, you can actually run checks and you can run commands by clicking buttons on the left that trigger code to be executed indeed on the right-hand side.
And that's a super cool idea.
Yeah, and the motivation here pedagogically is to just keep the instructions right next to the programming environment so that they feel cohesive and more like a lesson. And indeed, you'll notice the environment is very similar to Codecademy, if you've ever used some of their tutorials, and there's a lot of websites that have instructions on the left and coding environments on the right. But what's different about CS50 Lab, at least we hope, is that it's entirely free and customizable. So you don't have to even create an account on CS50. You just need a GitHub account, and you just need your own public repository. Because everything you're seeing here, it turns out, is just data that's stored in a freely available GitHub repo. And all of what you're seeing here is indeed HTML, but that HTML is not written by hand as HTML. It's actually written as Markdown, which is a very simple markup language that is then converted automatically by us to HTML.
So somebody could theoretically then create an entire course curriculum on here and make it publicly available.
Exactly, and so a lot of the teachers with whom we work now in high schools, a few of them have started to create their own labs and their own GitHub repos. They don't need us, they don't need to create an account, they don't need to upload things, they just need to use a GitHub repo, and they're completely autonomous. And in fact, if we keep going here, we'll see that this lab was all about walking through students through how to write Hello World. You'll see that there's some hints down here as well, and you'll see ultimately that there are some instructions for how students can submit this. And even though I kept clicking next, students can still back up. The entire script that they were following is still there. So what we're doing is sort of progressive disclosure of the content. All those next buttons are doing using JavaScript is hiding everything below them. So every time you click it, it just reveals a bit more when the student's ready to see it.
In this context, for this particular lab, it's kind of like an honor system-based exercise. But like you were saying, there's ways to actually make it enforced such that you do need to actually compile the code to continue.
Not to continue. You can always continue at the moment, but it is based on sort of trust. Like the only purpose to use this lab is if you want to learn. We have not bothered to implement mechanisms like you must get this correct before you can even see what's coming next. The goal was to be more, I think, open and progressive about it.
Sure, that makes sense.
Indeed. Any comments or questions?
I think we had a few questions. So the Solo Shake was asking, David, how do you manage time for these projects after teaching hours and these streams? I'm impressed.
And David is exhausted is how, I would say. Colton has to just keep making me set aside time and wake up.
And well, the good news is, I mean, I enjoy doing these. These are a lot of fun.
Oh,
so.
Thank you. I like spending time with you too.
CS50 Sandbox is prompting me for GitHub auth, which you've disclosed is the way that we
That's
authorize
to be expected.
people.
We do authenticate students because we want to know with what user ID to associate the sandboxes.
Vic J was asking, can you talk about how CS50 was made?
So CS50, the course was made 30 years ago in some form. I took over the course 12 years ago, and it has been constantly evolving. The tools that we're now using in the course have been either open source projects, sometimes commercial software, sometimes homemade projects like CS50 Sandbox and Lab. So that's probably a bigger topic than today allows for, but CS50 Sandbox and Labs are examples of the process and the mindset through which we went to figure out how to design better tools for students.
And it looks like he said also, talk about the design of this. Is it Docker? So maybe he's referring also to the labs, which you talked on previously before, just a new Ubuntu file system hosted somewhere else, some other server. Google said Google Cloud was hosting most of it.
Google Cloud is hosting the programming environment. Our server on Amazon is hosting the instructions in this case and is actually converting the Markdown to HTML. CS50 Lab also is a Flask-based Python application.
M4 and Ju saying, I'm impressed how you stand in front of those bright lights for so long.
Oh, yeah, me too. It gets a little hot, especially early in the year when it's still warm out.
In Sanders Theater, yeah. Cool, I think that's that.
All right. Well, let's take a look at where this all came from, right? Because it looks like this is pretty involved. There's a video, there's HTML, there's like headings, there's monospaced fonts, there's some sample code and commands and the like. So notice the URL here, and this might change, I should disclaim, but right now the way the labs work are as follows. You go to lab.cs50.io, and just to be clear, there's nothing there of interest right now. It's still on the to-do list to actually make a main menu, so that's to be expected.
No styling or anything, that's raw HTML.
No, the goal is to distribute the labs, not the landing page right now. But you'll notice after the lab.cs50.io domain name, you'll notice CS50/labs. It turns out that CS50 is the name of our GitHub account or our GitHub organization. Labs is the name of a repository of code on github.com. And then this is a branch there called 2018/fall. And this is the name of a folder in that repository on that branch.
So can this hook into any GitHub account then? Does it necessarily have to be CS50/X?
Nope, this can be anyone's account. So you literally right now, if you follow along right now or right after this stream, the instructions that we're going to provide you with, you can create your own lab, visit a URL of this format, and voila, even without our help or intervention, it will just work. The goal is to enable teachers and students to be entirely self-sufficient.
So is it then, I guess, fetching all of the files and rendering them sort of in that embedded web browser and just putting them into the file system?
Indeed, and we can take a look. Let's go ahead and go to github.com/CS50/labs, which is the name of the repository I mentioned. There's this weird word here called tree, which is a github.com specific feature. It has nothing to do with the repository itself. That just ends up in the URLs when you're browsing a repository. Here's the name of the branch, and here's the subdirectory I care about, and you can see this over here. If you've used github.com before, you can see some branches in this little drop-down. So we have 2018 fall, 2019 spring, 2019 X, and so forth.
I also want to point out that CFP's own Brenda is here, Curious Kiwi, and she's actually in the chat now.
Indeed.
Real Curious Kiwi.
Brenda, shout out here. Brenda was the most recent contributor to this repository because our labs are open source as well, so you can see the contents, and indeed that's what we're about to look at.
Cool.
So in this repository, notice, are just three files, .cs50.yaml, readme.md, and hello.c. Why is this noteworthy? Well, notice in the lab itself, there was one file we saw earlier, hello.c.
Yep.
And it turns out all of the instructions you're seeing on the left-hand side, that is readme.md.
Okay.
So just as on github.com, you can create a markdown file called readme.md, and it gets automatically rendered as HTML for you underneath all of your files in your repo. So are we taking that same approach to make it easy for teachers to just write some pretty simple markdown. They don't even have to know HTML, and it will just get automatically converted by us in lab.cs50.io to HTML.
Can we see what some of the markdown looks like by chance?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do that. Let's go over to the repository. You will see a preview of the markdown here, but again, GitHub automatically renders markdown as HTML, but not all of it, because we have some custom tags, as they're called, in markdown that we've added support to. GitHub doesn't understand those. We understand them. So let's go and look at the raw file to actually see everything that's going on. I'm going to click on readme.md. It again is going to be partially rendered by GitHub just to be user-friendly. I don't care about that. I want raw files. I don't want any interventions. And here you'll see the same content, but written as markdown. So do you know offhand, for instance, what the hash sign is?
I believe that's the fewer of the hashes, the larger the heading size.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so that's an H1 tag. If you do hash and then some word or words, you're going to get an open bracket H1 tag, some content, and a close H1 tag. Here you're going to get an H2 tag, and you can perhaps infer if you have 3 and 4 and 5, that's an H2 and 3 and 4 and 5 as well.
Makes sense.
So notice these are custom features. These are not built into Markdown itself. We are using, underneath the hood, a free tool called Jekyll. Jekyll is a static site generator, super popular for making your own personal home pages and portfolios. It is what GitHub Pages uses when you want to publish for free to GitHub Pages, a static website. We are using it too just because it's so popular.
Nice. And so it just basically pre-processes all of this and sort of replaces this video stuff. I mean, it's going to parse all the markdown at once. But wherever it sees this, almost like Jinja, it's going to replace that with some value, some iframe, if it's a video. Next might be a button of some kind that links to something else.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you'll see what these are. These are custom tags, so these won't work normally. These won't work on GitHub Pages, but they will work on lab.cs50.io. And so we've taken a open source product called Jekyll, free and open source, and we just added features using its API.
Nice. Okay, so we've coded the video parser module ourselves.
And what that does is if lab.cs50.io sees in your readme.md the keyword video, it's going to look at the next thing it sees, which is hopefully a URL on YouTube, and it's going to create the requisite iframe via which to embed it in the instructions for you.
That's pretty cool.
And this is just an alternative to copying and pasting yourself the actual iframe code. We don't want teachers to have to worry about, think about any HTML, so we just magically do this for them.
I like it. We have a few comments, and a lot of people were messaging also on YouTube. Tuan was asking, Tuan Win Min asked, there are multiple playlists of CS50 each year on YouTube, such as CS50 2018, 2017, 2016, and so on. Which one do you highly recommend a beginner with no programming experience begins with? Thank you.
Well, I love them all equally, but I'm a little biased. I would just typically recommend the most recent because, one, the tools are going to be the most up-to-date. The content is going to be the most up-to-date. If we talked about any current events in the news, that's going to be up-to-date. And theoretically, we try to make the course better and better and better every year, which suggests that the most recent version is the best, though we will defer to others' opinion on that aspiration.
There are a lot of different. There is a lot of different content for CS50. Is there a means to follow lessons and complete the general content of CS50? Asks Dwayne.
Yeah. So Dwayne, if you go to cs50.edx.org, that's perhaps the simplest way to see everything from the most recent year all together. You can sign up for free as an auditor, no need to pay, and you'll see everything there as well.
Oh, looks like Yella joined there in the
our friend
Facebook.
Yella from Amsterdam, who's contributed to some of the code that underlies this, and they've been using some of these labs as well, and the automatic grading features called Check 50.
Hello, guys. If I get it correctly, the CS50 Lab constantly refreshes the education frame, correct? Says R Sky Car.
Constantly. Every time you push a change to your repository and a student reloads the page or visits this for the first time, they will see the latest version of your README. We check the Git hash of your latest commit, and if we don't already have a copy of that latest one, we clone your repo, which has to be public in this design, and then we re-render the HTML. So you don't have to do anything. You just push it, and then we will automatically notice. But if a student already has a lab open in a tab from like yesterday, they are going to have to hit reload. They won't lose their files in the sandbox. They will be reloading the HTML on the left-hand side.
And the nice thing to note about the differences between sandbox and labs, you're talking about the sandbox is sort of ephemeral. It disappears after a certain period of time. The labs, by the nature of them fetching statically allocated GitHub content,
correct,
they'll always be, they'll never disappear because they're constantly just pulling the information. They might be spinning up instances of the sandbox, but the labs ultimately they last as long
correct.
as the GitHub
And any
repo
changes
exists.
students make to a lab is persisted, and that is not temporary. We'll keep that until we stop maintaining this particular tool. So you can assume it will be there tomorrow.
Patricia asks, I'm teaching AP CS50 using the legacy IDE. Any plans on moving the AP course to CS50 Labs?
Yes, this coming fall. So if you start your next year in August or September, everything will have switched over to the new version of CS50 IDE, as well as these tools, CS50 Sandbox and CS50 Lab. What we did, Patricia, this past year on campus here in Cambridge is we started the semester with Scratch, as always. We then introduced CS50 Sandbox just for in-class demos and lectures, just as you can if you would like in your own classroom this coming fall. Though you can also start using Sandbox right now, even though students won't know about it from any of our videos from last year. We then use CS50 Lab for problem sets 1 and 2 at Harvard College here. You can certainly use that for some of your own problems. And then after that, for problem set 3 and the rest of the semester, we transition to CS50 IDE. So the legacy IDE to which Patricia refers is what internally is version 3, thanks to our friends at Cloud9. That's still running on an older Google Cloud. Now that Cloud9 is part of Amazon, version 4 of Cloud9, as well as CS50's own IDE, will soon, starting this summer, be on Amazon's infrastructure as well. The UI and everything will still look the same, but we'll be helping folks migrate from one to the other, but we're waiting for the high school year to end.
Big changes. Ivan's asking, greetings from Kingston. I was wondering if you have any content to learn iOS programming. Have a good day.
Not recently, Ivan. A colleague and I, my friend Dan Armendariz, now at Amazon actually, who Colton knows as well, years ago we did teach a course called Computer Science E76 at Harvard's Extension School. But it's been many years, and even though the material is still freely available at CS76.tv, it's outdated by now. Apple has made so many changes that I would go to Stanford's course online. If you Google Stanford iOS course, they should have a much, much more recent and free version of a course as well.
I think they're at like iOS. Like they've released, I think, an SDK for every iOS version.
Oh my God, it changes so fast.
And I think the one that we did was what, 6 or 5?
Something like that, years ago. So don't just go to Stanford for your iOS programming needs.
Ziggy says, so happy you guys are providing this content. Currently going through CS degree. Nice to see how others present this information. Are those independent repos nested in Git, asks Bavik, or can we even nest Git repos?
You can't nest Git repos. I don't quite know what you mean there. Maybe you mean Git submodules or subtrees, but short answer, no. We don't clone those recursively anyway, but you can have subfolders in the repository. So we have a hello folder, we have a Mario folder, we have a bunch of other folders, and we'll come back to this. You can have multiple labs in your repository.
Asley said, the CS50 Lab is awesome for doing the problem sets. Thanks for all the hard work you put into it.
Very welcome.
Just want to say CS50 is the best MOOC on the internet, says
Rob, thank you.
Really stuck with the C part of the course. Willing to start with Python soon, says D. Solomon.
Hang in there. The C stuff will serve you well. Python will seem so much easier once you've gotten comfy with the C part.
Yeah, definitely. And then Bavik said, the work goes into set up the coding environment with env and all. This saves a lot of time given that you have internet working properly, which I have to agree.
Very
It's very
true.
nice. Very, very
And
easy.
hang in there. We do know that some folks have slow internet, expensive internet, no internet, and we do have CS50 IDE offline for that, even though it's a bit complicated to set up with Docker and such. So we do hear you. We're just waiting for certain technologies to catch up so that we can make all of this technology offlineable.
Someone with slow internet, but maybe with a bit of RAM, you would maybe recommend set up a local Docker instance and handle all of this type of thing?
It would just be too painful using a slow internet connection. Use something offline if you can in that case.
Yeah. Ziggy, VicJ, Vindev, and Royco Cup, thank you very much for the follows. Nice. And if something goes wrong with CS50 resources, Sandbox, IDE, Lab, Reference, etc., where do we report the bugs or typos?
Any of our social media channels, we read everything, even though we do our best to reply to everything, and we always notice when something is broken with a tool. So simply reach out on CS50. Actually, let's type out, if you could, cs50.edx.org/communities. Via any of those channels, one of us will spot it. This way you can post via whatever mechanisms you have an account. And then we're going to go ahead and post one other URL where you can't report things, but you can keep track of things. Can you go ahead and share cs50.statuspage.io?
One word like that?
Yep, this is CS50 status page, which is hosted by a third party, so that if we are down, hopefully they are not, you can still see our status. And what we'll do typically is either automatically, if we notice something's wrong automatically with some of our checks, we'll automatically announce to the world something is broken, here's what we know, or sometimes we manually post alerts as to what is wrong so that you can keep tabs on any problems we're working on.
Awesome. I think we're all caught up on the questions. One question I had was, with these, the sort of web views, is there a way for us to click a button to go to an entirely another sort of contained exercise?
Not at the moment. Within labs, once you're in the lab, you are in that lab. We deliberately aren't linking them together. Okay. We've thought about this. People have asked about this. Still thinking about it because labs tend to take a non-trivial amount of time. It could be several hours for some students, and I haven't been convinced that we necessarily want to tie them all together because the reality is someone's more likely to go to sleep sometimes than to just click next and move on to the next one. So it's possible, we just haven't decided if that's the UI we want to provide.
Sure, makes sense.
So we can share a few other features though of the markdown file here. You might recall the green next buttons that I was clicking. The means by which you create those is you just create this. This is a Jekyll tag that we've added support for, and that frankly just creates a little bit of HTML in the DOM, and then we're using JavaScript and jQuery, a library that's popular in the JavaScript world. We are effectively, anytime we see a next button, hiding everything below it. So every time you click on the button, you are inducing a function to be called, a click handler, that is then revealing everything between that button and any next button in the page. So more on that. Colton will be leading with some of the team. Colton will be leading some streams on JavaScript and jQuery. Sorry, a little tired, as we noted earlier.
A couple weeks we'll be doing JavaScript from the beginning without any jQuery, and then we'll actually dive into jQuery, because since that's a JavaScript library, I think it makes sense to start with the JavaScript basics, go to jQuery, and then we'll make some full websites using all of the stuff we've learned so far.
Indeed. And you'll see now, if you've never seen Markdown before, it's almost entirely just ASCII or Unicode text, but you'll see some tricks like this. This is going to go ahead and give me italics in HTML. It's going to generate like an EM tag for me automatically. These backticks, as they're called, are how you can create monospaced code type fonts so that you can display it as though it's a code or command. If we keep scrolling down here, we'll see this is how you can do a multi-line code block. You can do backtick, 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 and then type the command, and it will show up in a little monospaced font in a gray box. And if we keep going, you'll see another H2 tag, which is going to be induced by this. Keep going, and here it just gets a little repetitive, right? These are really just step-by-step instructions, but this is by design. Even though for a teacher this starts to get a little long, the idea is to keep it in a familiar world. GitHub already supports readme.md files. Hopefully folks are familiar with them, and we didn't want to have to create a complicated thing where we have to create multiple files and so forth. It's just one text file written in Markdown, and we take care of the rendering of it as HTML for you.
We're sort of adopting GitHub's paradigm and repurposing it completely, which is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? Why reinvent login? Why reinvent Markdown support? Why reinvent any number of features when we can just lean on others for that?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take a look at a slightly more complicated lab, because there's more features than this. The Hello World lab that we provide is really by design the simplest of them. So let me go ahead to a different lab, and to Babak Knight's question earlier about nesting, if this is an answer to that question, you'll see that in our CS50/labs repo, we have a whole bunch of labs. These are all of the labs we used this past fall on the 2018/fall branch. And again, if you want to play along at home, all of this is in github.com, if you don't mind pasting, /CS50/labs. And let me go ahead and go into one of my favorites that we've used in the course for many years, Mario. For those less comfortable, you'll see in this directory we have a few more files, and let me go ahead and point these out as well as one we didn't look at earlier. So you'll see a readme.md file with the instructions for this lab. You'll see mario.c, which is our distribution code, the starter code. There's pseudocode.txt, which is actually just a file we ask students as part of the homework to write pseudocode in for their Mario algorithm before they do it. Pyramid.ping is just an image so that we can show students a screenshot that gets rendered in the HTML. But there's this other file here, and our Hello lab had this as well. So let me go ahead and let's look at it in the context of Hello, because that was a little simpler. Let me go back to Hello and look at that third and final file here called .cs50.yaml. So this is CS50 specific, and this is a file format that we came up with Chad and with Yella, two of our team members who were here with us this past summer, because we also support this same type of configuration file for some of the CS50's other auto-grading tools. You'll see that we have a YAML file, yet another markup language, which is just similar in spirit to JSON, if you're familiar, but without all of the parentheses and curly braces.
I sort of think of YAML as the Pythonic JSON.
Sure, that works. Yeah, and actually no parentheses, without all the curly braces and square brackets.
Yeah.
So you'll see here a few things. So one, just the name Lab50 to indicate to our tools that this is for CS50 Labs, aka Lab50. A command here that we use early on just to disable check50 for this particular lab because it's so relatively simple. And then files. This is a YAML array of all of the files we want to include or exclude. So what we do using YAML syntax, which might be new to you, is we say exclude star, which means don't include any files from this repo. But by the way, go ahead and include one file after all called hello.c.
So the default is to include star, which is, I'm guessing, why you're doing exclude star.
Correct. And these are in order from top to bottom. Unfortunately, this is not good design. Much like exclamation point important in CSS means important and not important,
right,
as you might read it in code.
Yeah.
So in YAML does bang exclude mean exclude, not don't exclude.
Yeah,
so
that's a bit
this is just
strange.
horrible, horrible, horrible design.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's the opposite of what you might think as a program.
I would expect the exclamation point to be at the end. But it
yes, I agree.
Yeah.
This is important
Yeah.
and not the other way around.
Yeah.
So let's go into the Mario lab, but actually do it in the context of the browser. Let's go to Mario/less, and we will see Zamila again, but for a different problem. Here we have the same kind of environment, but notice the video has changed slightly, even though we're still joined by Zamila. We have over here on the right-hand side an empty pseudocode.txt file, because we want students to write some pseudocode, and then we want them to work on Mario.c, which also is not complete. There's a big gap here where we want them to start writing their code.
So it's cool. We can sort of provide a boilerplate code for students to just
Exactly.
dive right into the problem.
So this is why, again, CS50 Lab is really designed for teachers to create and for students to use. If we click the folder, you'll see those two files, mario.c and pseudocode.txt, and if you're familiar with the command line already, ls for list will show us those same two files. But notice here in this lab, if I click next, I'll see a screenshot, and I alluded to that earlier. We'll see some sample output, which is just thanks to Markdown. And if we keep going and going, you'll see some sample output. So again, these are just the instructions. But you'll also see here a try it command. And if I click try it, you'll see just a reminder for students. So we also wanted this to be pedagogically useful, and we didn't want to overwhelm students with everything, and we also didn't want to tell them everything. So we wanted to start making things a little more interactive. So by clicking try it, you see a reminder as to how you can try this out, but using the staff solution in the sandbox. So you'll see a bit.ly URL, and if I click this link, it'll open another tab containing not the lab, but a staff implementation of Mario, but without the source code, just the compiled program.
How feasible would it be to actually integrate this with the existing lab? I'm
We
guessing
could-
it probably requires some wiring.
A little bit. We could absolutely distribute a sample solution with the lab, but then we have to decide where to put it, and you would have to use like a slash or a tilde to access it in another folder. So it's all possible. We just decided not to do that. However, we thought about creating inline sandboxes even. It just gets a little overwhelming eventually.
An
so we haven't
inline
really-
sandbox is pretty meta.
Yeah, we haven't really decided on that yet, but anything is possible, certainly. And if I click next, a few other times you'll see a command like this, spoilers. So we also wanted to build into the lab environment the notion of hints, or spoilers, And if I go ahead and click this, you'll see some sample pseudocode that we just give to students just to help them. This is, again, one of the first problems that they implement in this course called CS50, and we didn't want them to struggle just with the basics of pseudocode. So if they're sitting here in pseudocode.txt and they're really not sure what to write, we have this feature built into Labs where a teacher, or we, can create a button called anything we want, and if you click it, notice you see more information.
I like it. I like the nice styling you have here too with the little dialogue.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's all thanks to GitHub. GitHub actually has a library called Primer CSS. And in Primer, let's go to this here. It's free and open source, and it's an alternative to Bootstrap and Foundation and Semantic, if you're familiar with those. It's just an open source CSS library that helps you make your tools look like GitHub, which for the first version of this tool, we wanted it to be because it's all based on GitHub itself.
We wanted students to maybe feel like they're kind of working within the same world, same universe.
Exactly.
It looks like Warrior X Club on YouTube asked, how to participate in the CS50 Fair for foreign students?
Not currently possible if you're not registered in the on-campus class. If you do officially take the course through Harvard's Extension School, the continuing ed program, those students can participate in the on-campus fair. The reason is, while anyone is welcome to come to CS50's lectures, we only have so much room for the fair on campus. We had some 800 students this past year, so it's tough to fit in even the students that we have. So by all means, keep that in mind. And if we can find a bigger space someday, we'll happily open it up further.
It was beautiful, but it was packed.
It was a little packed already.
Dwayne was asking, I've done some HTML, CSS, and Sass, but no JavaScript yet. Did I hear you have some JavaScript coming up soon? Yes, in a couple of weeks we'll be doing JavaScript and jQuery, so stay tuned for those. And then somebody in the Twitch chat had another comment. They said, sorry, 1 second. Tuxman said that they just wanted to chime in that they tested the sandbox in Safari and that it works great.
Oh,
or sorry, on iOS Safari.
Yeah, it does. Yes, the sandbox mostly works on mobile. It's not designed to, and our friends at Next.tech only officially support, I believe, Chrome and a few other modern browsers on desktop and laptops. But yes, it does work pretty well on iOS, even on a small phone, which is great, because CS50 IDE does not work well on a device. It was never designed with mobile in mind. We've heard reports that CS50 Sandbox does not work as well on Android, which is a little unfortunate. But again, the underlying software was not designed for mobile. So it kind of sort of works, but we're not offering it up officially as mobile-friendly yet.
KStark007, can I download files from the sandbox, meaning can I export files from the sandbox?
Yep, you can go ahead here and off to the side, there's a little ... next to every file, and you can go ahead and click download to grab all of the files. Or if you're comfortable with Git, you can certainly use Git and do things like git add and then git commit and then git push and push your code to something like a GitHub repository.
Wow, this is showing all the code that I wrote actually in C as practice as Bavik before I made Mario working. Great work indeed.
Nice.
Google. Awesome. I think that's all caught up. Oh, and M4 was saying that they dig YAML, and I just want to make sure that I got all of the recent followers. So it's like Brightco Cup.
Nice,
Actually,
yeah.
I think I did catch up all the followers. I think we're all caught up.
Well, let's take a final look in our remaining time at some of the documentation so that if you're a teacher especially, you can follow those instructions and start creating your own labs if that's of interest. You can certainly use CS50's own as well. And even if you're a student, you want to just create lessons for friends or for other folks, by all means, you're welcome to use the labs as well. All of this is free, Sandbox and Labs. You just need a free github.com account so that you can authenticate and you can save your information. But for the most part, that's all you need to get started. So let's go ahead and point you at the documentation. If you go again, if you don't mind, to cs50.readthedocs.io. Along the left-hand side of the menu, you'll see a link to CS50 Sandbox, for instance. And if I scroll on this, it's mostly just a high-level overview of how CS50 Sandbox works. We explain some features that it has and features that it doesn't have to help people understand the differences between it and CS50 IDE, which is also freely available. But you'll also notice our official documentation for the HTTP parameters that are built in there. And you'll see that here are some of the most popular configuration parameters, the ability to specify file names to pre-create, whether or not you want a text editor or embedded browser or the like, and a few other features. So you can go ahead here and see some sample code as well.
This is cool. So you get to maybe visualize a teacher spawning an individual sandbox for each student in a classroom?
Yep, exactly. And now let's go to CS50 Lab, which is a little more involved because it takes a little more manual setup to do in a GitHub repository. It does assume that you're pretty familiar with Git, either the web UI on github.com or a command line interface. And you'll see here that we have official documentation for the format of the URLs. So here you see lab.cs50.io/owner/repo/branch/path, each of which is prefixed by a colon, which just means it's a placeholder. You don't literally type out those words. And what those values are, it entirely depends on your own GitHub username and branch name and all of that. And then if you scroll down here before, you'll see some examples of exactly how you can go about configuring .cs50.yaml, the possible values that are allowed, and so forth. So on the one hand, you can just look at our open source labs and infer from that how to do it. It's pretty straightforward, but here's the official formal documentation as well.
Nice, and it's very nicely styled, again.
Well, this we have our friends at Read the Docs to thank for because they provide this framework for creating very pretty looking documentation.
I feel like I've seen that, like different Python libraries have used this.
Yes, indeed. So it actually uses something called Sphinx underneath the hood, which is open source software via which you generate documentation from a file format called restructured text, or RST. Frankly, I don't love RST, but Read the Docs also supports Markdown these days. So we use Markdown for almost everything except when we have to use restructured text.
Sounds similar in spirit to Jekyll a little bit.
It is functionally equivalent to Jekyll, just harder to use. Indeed.
Nice, that's cool. Very flexible, awesome platform. Great for education, great for, I think, community-driven development. I think that could be a huge aspect to this.
We wanted to ultimately make it easy for teachers out there to create for free their own Codecademy-style lessons without having to be tied to a particular platform, but with the ability to collaborate with others, to make their own code open source, to version control things on GitHub. So just to get a lot of familiar features for free, and then build some hopefully pedagogically compelling experiences for students.
Yeah, it's an awesome, nice sort of offshoot from the IDE idea.
Indeed.
I like it a lot.
Well, we have a few minutes here. We're happy to take a couple of questions. And again, go to all the URLs that Colton has kindly been pasting into the chats if you'd like to learn more, play more. But the first place to start literally is sandbox.cs50.io, and then optionally these other links we've been pasting in.
Nice. Yeah, we'll take some questions. Ivan asked or said, I took CS50 4 or 5 years ago through edX while I was in Mexico. I'm so thankful with all that you do, guys.
Nice. Thanks for the nice words. Glad to hear.
Yeah, and so tomorrow we'll be doing a stream on Solitaire. So just me tomorrow. We'll be coding Solitaire from scratch. It's a Windows, well, it's not a Windows game, but it's a card game that was popularly shipped with Windows, older versions of Windows, Windows 95, etc. Where you place cards down sort of sequentially, draw them from a deck, physically played long before its Windows incarnation, obviously. But we'll be doing it in Love and Lua. And then on Friday, Emily Hong will be joining us for a look at web scraping.
Nice. And Solitaire, it'll be just you.
Just me for Solitaire.
Solitaire for Solitaire.
Solitarily, we'll be programming Solitaire.
Okay.
Solitarily.
Thanks for the kind words, and Kloppenberg. Thanks for this.
Yeah.
Oh, and a question from K-Stark 007. Can we connect multiple sandboxes using NAT? Not really. You can connect one to another via HTTP, as I demoed earlier when running a web server, but they won't accept other incoming port connections, so most likely you cannot achieve what you're alluding to, I would say.
Do you have any side projects going?
I do. One is called CS50 Sandbox, and one is called CS50 Lab, both of which are continuing to be in progress. We do have one other project that's still in motion, and actually hopefully soon will this be merged in. If I go to CS50's Python library, which is the open source library we use partway through the semester to introduce students to Python IO, or input-output, as well as to SQL, you'll notice that there's a pull request here pending. This might be merged in as soon as later today, but it contains a whole bunch of changes to the library that I've been working on as a side project with CS50's own Kareem Zadan. You'll see there's a lot of changes in here, some of which are actually collapsed, and you'll see some feedback from Kareem since all of this is publicly available, and you'll see that we've made lots of changes to the SQL code, the goal of which is to actually support different formats. So if you're curious, and if you're familiar already with CS50's Python library, what this pull request or proposal aspires to do is this. This past year, we had support for SQL queries that look like this. You use some SQL, and if you want to have some placeholders in it, you do colon something, and then colon something else, and then you pass in arguments like that. First equals someone, and last equals someone, using Python's named parameters. That's just one way, but we're also going to add support for Python dictionaries, which might be helpful in some contexts, even though we won't necessarily introduce them to students, because it's not solving a new problem. You can also, though, starting this fall, use what are called positional parameters. You can go ahead and select your code here and just put in question marks, and therefore pass in just a second and a third argument without named parameters. Now, arguably, this is not as good as the existing approach using the colon placeholders because it's a little less, it's a little more ambiguous as to which is first, which is second. Like you have to think a bit more. But it shortens the code, it cleans it up, and honestly, I find it incredibly redundant when a student has to say first here and first over here, sometimes a third place if they have that value in a variable, let alone last. So we've decided just to offer up different options. And so this pull request documents any number of different formats that you can start using with the CS50 library for SQL, and we handle all of the escaping, hopefully correctly, for what are called SQL injection attacks, which we talk about in the course as well. So that's my most recent side project from this past weekend.
Nice. Pretty cool. I think you were mentioning that actually yesterday.
Indeed. Hello from Romania, says Crazy Flock. Hello from Harvard here.
Solitarily solitaire, LOL.
Does edX use Bootstrap? Asks the Soul Lashake. If not, then why not? I don't know. You'd have to ask them. You could certainly look at their code, and we can look at their code. Let's go to edX.org. Let's go to View, Developer, View Source, and let's literally search for Bootstrap. I see no mention of it, which does not mean they don't use it. However, Bootstrap tends to use certain classes, and Bootstrap tends to look a certain way unless you've themed it or skinned it very differently. I don't think they do use Bootstrap. I'm not seeing Bootstrap-like widgets. I'm not seeing classes in here that resemble Bootstrap. So I'm going to guess with high probability that they're not using Bootstrap. Why not? I mean, Bootstrap's not the only library out there. They could have been using their own. They could have been using some other third party. Tough to say.
Colton, I'm a little stuck on the Mario assignment. Any tips for the first problem to have the player always land above ground?
This is for the games course, to
yes.
be clear, not the ASCII version.
Yes. So this is related to the games course that I teach, where we implement in Love and Lua, which we'll be looking at tomorrow, a version of Super Mario Brothers that's actually sprite-based, and you can move things around continuously. So that particular exercise has you generating the world from scratch. You literally go row by row and sort of simply implement gaps in the ground, bushes, pillars, obstacles. But the algorithm as it stands is purely random. There's no sort of ensuring that the very first area that Mario spawns is necessarily above ground. There is a module in the exercise, I believe it's the level maker.lua, where this is all laid out, the entire algorithm. And it's essentially just a nested for loop that goes row by row, column by column, rather in this case, throughout the entire world, and just starts at the bottom, works its way down, and does an if check. And if some coin flip returns true, it'll generate flat land. If not, it'll generate just empty space, an abyss. And so you could easily just hard code, the very beginning to be whatever you want. And so without giving the answer away, which I might have already done, instead of maybe making it purely random, influence the weight of where Mario does spawn, which I believe is at X level 1 grid-wise or X level 2, and just change the way that the level maker actually works. Make it, if it's a coin flip for solid ground and coin flip for a chasm, maybe influence that a little bit.
I see K-Stark now asks, can we try to create a honeypot using the sandbox to route unwanted traffic into it for dev only? Probably not for the same reason. It only exposes HTTP, and therefore you can access things like a temporary web page, but the container will be shut off after some amount of use when it's idling with no human interaction, and it doesn't allow incoming connections on other ports, so most likely not. That's not really the right tool. I would sign up for like a free account on AWS, Amazon's cloud, or Google, or Microsoft Azure, and use those services instead, which will give you more control.
Bavik was asking, are we not using f-strings in your pull request?
In my pull request?
Your,
No, that was deliberate, actually. We've started internationalizing some of our libraries, which means making them translatable into other human languages for error messages and such. F-strings don't make that easy. We instead use the older format of the .format method so that we can factor out the strings, and it's just cleaner that way.
Interesting. And you're welcome, Adam. edX question, auditing CS50 opens the whole course and grading, just no certificate. How to find similar courses since I tried auditing a course, but it has no grading and a time limit?
I don't know if you can search for such on edX. You can try emailing info@edx.org to ask them that question. I'm afraid I'm just not familiar enough with the range of offerings beyond CS50's own. Adamantine asks about what you can do with a free AWS account. anything really. It gives you access to virtual machines, to containers, to any number of cloud-based services. It's what's known as infrastructure as a service, as well as a platform as a service, which means they have a huge menu of offerings. I would go to aws.amazon.com and just read through some of the summaries of the features they have, and that will much more thoroughly answer that question.
It's a little bit overwhelming, to be honest. They have so many.
It's too many, yes. How important is it, asks Amchora. How important is C? Is it necessary to learn C if I'm comfortable with Python? Necessary? No. Whether or not it's important is really up to you. I do think understanding a language like C makes you better as a software engineer. You understand what's going on underneath the hood, so to speak, of higher level languages like Python. But you definitely don't need to learn it, and many students go on to be very successful programmers and computer scientists without knowing it. We just tend to introduce it because we do think it has pedagogical value. All right, well, I think we have a couple more, another minute or two here. Let's see, any questions? I see a comment from Patricia on YouTube. Online IDEs are a game changer for CS education. Thanks for making Lab available. Very welcome. Hope you do find it helpful in your own classroom, whether this semester or this coming fall. Does CS50 in general use AWS or Google Cloud? Asks M4NJHU. Mostly AWS. We have since early on, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years now. And indeed, our friends at Cloud9 recently transitioned over to Amazon, so we're using them all the more now as a result.
Sergio Demo, what are you guys going, or what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Well, we're going to get ready for our next streams in just a couple of days here with Colton, both Solitaire and with Emily, one of CS50's teaching fellows. Do take a look back at some of our past streams if you're curious about Docker. Do take a look at the URLs we've been pasting into the chat on both Twitch and YouTube here today if you'd like to learn more, and feel free to reach out via any of CS50's communities if you'd like to connect with classmates or any of us. But thanks so much for tuning in. And it sounds like, I think we're at the end here. M4NJHU has to go to a Galaxy S10 launch now, so that seems like the right time to wrap up and say goodbye.
That's amazing. Well, thanks everybody so much for tuning in. Thanks to David for holding this awesome discussion on the Sandbox and Labs.
Thank you.
Tune in tomorrow for Solitaire, for me solitarily programming Solitaire.
Wonderful.
It's going to be a good time. We'll make a game from scratch. And then Friday, Emily Hong for the very first time, web scraping, and then the weekend. So thanks all again. Thank you all. We will see you tomorrow.